I'm here. It's 3D, and I think it's time to change some perspective. Now, I'm not gonna lie. Today is another Bitcoin day, which we got to change your perspective on how you view it, whether you like it or don't. I'm sure there's something there we can change for you. Um, so today it's going to be again about security, the beast attacking the Bitcoin chain, the network, the coin, the users, all of that. Um, and so before I go any further, I want to do their Bitcoin security talk because there is a lot that can be covered. And today it's mostly going to be, like hash rates and attack scenarios and stuff like that. But perhaps maybe, you have a question about Bitcoin specifically or crypto in general. And so I would like if you would send your questions to us, either comment on this video, I don't know, tag me or send me a DM, something like that, just saying, hey, here's my Bitcoin question, or hey, here's my crypto question, and just ask it, because I want to do an episode of these where I just go over your questions so you guys can actually get answers. Because I know a lot of times when you're going through like other resources or Medium articles or Schiller's, you get weird responses. You don't get legit, honest responses most of the time. You get, chilling basically is normally you get. Well, I ain't here to do that. I don't sell anything like that, bro. So I want to actually give you a non-biased answer for your questions. Rather they're security, privacy, in general, just drop them in and I will throw them on a show and we will answer those questions. So that is for a later show. I just want to give you guys a little bit of time to get that in. So today, security over Bitcoin. Oh yeah. And sometimes I think when you're doing research and searching and how does the security of a chain really work or whatever, it's sometimes a good idea to like look into the historical and the ideological attack methods that could be performed. So I do want to talk about both of those. And when I talk about one, I'm also going to explain a little bit of how we protect against it. So what the flaw is, where the vulnerability is, what the protection for that flaw and or vulnerability is. Because some of these are going to be two things, some of these are going to be one. And I think you guys are going to be a little bit surprised what some of these answers really are. Now, I don't have anything to throw on the screen today. So if you just want to put in the earphones and maybe play a game or something, I'll be right here talking with you, bro. You can still learn. You can still understand what's going on. I'll make sure I get more stuff to pop up on screen next time. That was totally on me, because finding actual attacks on Bitcoin is harder than it used to be. There used to be an entire website to historical Bitcoin attacks and possible Bitcoin attacks. Now that same website doesn't really exist, and the websites that do exist, all of them were very not legit. They just pretty much talked about like places that fell, possible scams, and these aren't the same thing as attacks on Bitcoin. So I think that's the first thing we need to talk about. What really is an attack on Bitcoin? Well, let's go to the very first attack on Bitcoin, and it is the old-fashioned faux coin attack. Now, I know faux coin, false coin or fake coin is another way it's said, but basically there was a single transaction in 2010 to create more Bitcoin than what's supposed to even exist. Now, I mean, technically, this actually worked. This was actually minted for about an hour. The chain was rolled back, and they got rid of it. Now, the problem is, though, this block still exists. Bitcoin, don't forget bad blocks. It's one of the hidden secrets of Bitcoin. It can be secure against attacks it's seen before because it has the proof that it had happened before. And it can start correlating data points that say, hey, I noticed I'm getting attacked by the same wallet or the same IP or the same blah, blah, blah over and over and over. And there is network security. So there is actually a way to say, hey, look, if we're seeing traffic from a specific route or from a specific location or an IP, we can actually say, hey, don't allow that direct connection. They need an indirect connection or a longer route or a mask or something else to allow them to connect. So it doesn't mean they're completely blocked off. It just makes it harder for that one to connect. And that's really important because the fact that Bitcoin can learn from its own attacks means that, well, it can always evolve. So these ones right here, total have happened. These are historical attacks. So the next one is called wallet corruption. And this basically is when your wallet sends data back to the, not the creator of the wallet, but the creator of the software you got your wallet from. 1 second. Blah, blah, blah. And basically there have been various different types of software wallets where they either create a wallet for you, or they are basically a wallet in an app that they completely were bad and they would send data back. And one of the best examples of this is btcpaperwallet.com. And this was one of the longest running paper wallet generator systems. They had BTC paper wallet, LTC paper wallet. I mean, I think it was like 10 or 12 different coins that this one software actually did. And depending on which connection port you connected to, got you a different coin that it would create wallets for. Problem is, you could actually download this entire software and use it completely offline. You didn't ever need to be online to use it. So what people, after about 2012, if you were using this wallet online, you were screwed. If you're using it on a computer that went online, you were screwed. So basically, this wallet, you would create any number of paper wallets, and it would send that private keys back to the person after 2012, because the wallet thing changed around there. We don't know if the person sold the address or what happened, but that's what happened after 2012. It became a bad wallet. And everybody started moving to hierarchical HD wallets, hierarchy demand or determination, hierarchy deterministic wallets, where basically you can have, it's kind of how Ethereum wallets work. You have one wallet key, which can create an infinite number of sub-wallets. So that became a better system. And then, as odd as it is, we all moved to the Ian Coleman generator, which when the Ian Coleman generator first came out for the first 3 years, it didn't work right. I remember I got in a fight with Anatopoulos and whatever his name is, AANTOP or whatever, Andrew Anatopoulos. I don't know his name. What is his guy? I got in a fight with him. He was talking about the PTC paper wallet thing, and I was like, bro, if you had just downloaded and used it on a computer never online, bro, you're good. And he was like, for fuck's sake, bro. And then he was telling me about Ian Coleman. I was like, but Ian Coleman didn't work last time I tried it. And it was just basically like, when was that? Like, oh yeah, like 2013. And he's like, yeah, it works now, bro. Go try it out. And now it's actually one of my most used paper wallet generators to this day. So the next one I want to talk about is Green Wallet or Brain Wallet. So I know you guys have heard, this is there's like tons of these like hard drive wallets, or I can't remember the actual terms for them, hardware wallet, where they're like, yeah, it's a brain wallet, bro. You just flip a coin 250 times or 256 times and put down yes or no, up or down, 0 or 0. Well, believe it or not, brain wallets are actually bad wallets. Green Wallet is a type of brain wallet, but Green Wallet was the first wallet system to ever be exiled by the Bitcoin community. This basically created a wallet with so very little security. Sometimes if you just click the button to generate a wallet enough times, you would get a wallet that had money in it. And people had actually developed entire algorithms to guess your wallet address without knowing anything about you. Like, it's just a mathematical equation that can guess wallet addresses predictively well for the Green Wallet system or Brain Wallet system. So if you're using a Brain Wallet or a Green Wallet, no. Now I was doing research for this. There is a new, and I don't know anything about that wallet. It's not the same one. Green Wallet is type of wallet in Bitcoin, and not specifically the wallet. So before we called it Brain Wallet, it was called Green Wallet because it didn't take as much energy to create that key. And the way we protected against that was we said, stop using that kind of wallet, bro. Brain wallets are bad. We need, more mathematical statistical data for entropy to create a larger number to get a better secure wallet. So it came down to the amount of entropy we use. And so green wallets always the same amount. Now we try to get people to use all different kinds of amount of entropy. Like I believe Ian Coleman actually has a thing on there where you can like click a button a bunch of times. There's another online wallet that creates paper wallets where they want you to click a button like 256 times all over the screen in different spots, and it records each location as an entropy point. Kind of cool. So software validation attack, and this one definitely is a tricky one. So basically, we all use software to validate data coming from the Bitcoin blockchain, right? It's kind of how it works. I mean, you can do it by hand if you really want to do the math, bro. But software validation attack is where the software that validates the data you're receiving is basically a virus. We're just going to say it like that's not a real specific term for it, but it basically becomes a man-in-the-middle attack using the software validation system specifically. So whenever you send out a transaction or anything, it can actually change data points. The best way people remember this from the olden days is you would go send a Bitcoin transaction, and your transaction, like you would say, send to wallet A, and by the time it got blocked, it would say send to wallet B. But it can actually do a lot more than that. And so one of the things that they did to try to help against this was they put the code out on how to make your own software validation system completely out there. Like it's completely out there. And when I say that, I mean like some big company people that had some really good software for validating put out the code for free for everybody to use. And so now it's like, well, if you're really afraid, you can actually just build it yourself and make sure it's good. But on top of that, they also started creating resource materials online to obtain some of this stuff. So now when you download the Bitcoin Core program, it comes with software validation. Where before, originally at one point in time, you had to have that was separate. And at one point in time, there was a button on the software thing where you could just click get coins and get coins. It was kind of cool. So memory attack. This is also the infamous Coinbase double spin. So this wasn't very long ago. Like 2018 or 2019, maybe 2020, somewhere in that area. Basically, there was a memory attack. And what that means is that one large group of miners claimed that a specific block was blocked in a specific way. So a specific transaction performed a specific amount of, it moved a specific amount of money. And then all of the other miners said otherwise. And this isn't exactly like a 50-50 split, but it is a big enough or close enough to a 50-50 split that for some reason, both transactions exist. Now, we call this the Coinbase double spin because if you go to any resource that does not use Coinbase data, which is the company, by the way, Coinbase, then it says the transaction was done a specific way. We're going to call that specific way A. But if you go to any data point that is from Coinbase, the company, it says that same transaction went to way B, which calls a $27 worth of Bitcoin at the time double spin. And I think right now, that's like a $40-something double spin right now at the price of Bitcoin right now. But the real point here is the fact that Coinbase, the company, has a large enough amount of miner sets and memory sets that many people use that both transactions coexist simultaneously in the same block at the same time. It's freaking creepy. And it's because of a different type of problem. And we'll get in that here in just a few minutes. But let's go to out-of-network slip. So what is an out-of-network slip? Well, this is like announcing transactions from outside the Bitcoin network, which is 100% possible. So the problem was there have been times where, announcing transactions outside the Bitcoin network where the root is not the root that we would expect or something. And it's basically not coming from a node. Sometimes you get a big flux of these. And when you get a big flux of these, it basically just causes, it's almost like a DDoS, but not quite. Imagine if your mempool was DDoS. That's what this really is. And this has happened before in the past. I want to say in 2016, 2017, and 2018. Throughout those 3 years, there were tons of OONs that just kept making where you would send a Bitcoin transaction. It would say, all right, bro. And then like 30, 60 days later, it would be like, yeah, you never sent that transaction, bro. It wasn't even in the meme pool. And that's what this was. Basically, there were so many transactions coming in, going directly into the meme pool, that the meme pool wasn't catching all the data. So the miners and the nodes weren't catching all of the announcements. And this sounds a lot like a DDoS to the chain, but since then we have actually seen on other chains what a DDoS to the chain really looks like. So this is a DDoS to the meme pool. It's kind of cool to know that you could attack something specifically like the memory pool. So fork attacks. Okay, this has 2 issues here, and we're going to go into both of them. So user activated soft forks, where users doing things creates too many soft forks. What's a soft fork? What's a hard fork? All right, yeah, that's a good point. Soft fork is a temporary fork to decide on 2 different blocks that may be blocked at the same time. It has to make a decision which one's being used. So the way Bitcoin is designed is there is hopefully 1 or less soft forks naturally from the Bitcoin system every 2 weeks. So about every time that we start correlating the difficulty, we start to see at least 1, if we're lucky 0, soft forks from the system. But if the users are doing enough on the system that they don't quite understand, like some users using some systems that are only existing on other certain parts of the network and vice versa, and we get enough different versions of stuff being done on the network at the same time, we get user activated soft forks. And this can actually be detrimental to a lot of things where blocks can basically get locked in obesity, or not obesity, I can't remember the word, but they get locked out of play. And kind of like that one from 2010, there's that block where that one guy made more Bitcoins than ever existed. It's still in the Bitcoin network. It's just not used. Something like that. Orphaned. It's become orphaned. Now, the other way that we have fork attacks is anytime the Bitcoin forks directly, like a hard fork, or there's a fork on the code base. Okay, anytime one of those 2 things happen, the code base forks, and I mean big fork, where major changes are done in the code base, and we have 2 different versions of the code base being used simultaneously, one being the old and one having the new stuff in it. Or the actual hard fork of the chain, where we now have the chain split into 2 because enough people are doing something different that it causes it to fork. Well, anytime that happens, there is an opportunity for a double spin attack. And there have been times where people have actually taken advantage of this. The Coinbase double spin was actually done on a hard fork. So just to prove that that's an actual thing, that is when that one happened. Now, you go to Speedy Trial. This one is fun to look at because I believe it's actually a BIP. I believe it's actually a Bitcoin improvement proposal, BIP 8 or something like that. And basically, this allows soft fork upgrades pretty quickly. This allows them to go through a faster process to be put into play. And this is also a type of an attack because if you're implementing soft fork upgrades too quickly or in ways that are outside of the community consensus, this is how it happened last time, outside the community consensus, then you could do a speedy trial attack. And with the speedy trial attack, you could actually upgrade the system into a way to where there's tons of vulnerabilities or a specific vulnerability that someone could take advantage of. So it basically means that people weren't able to validate the soft fork enough, but yet it's then being used pretty quickly. And so Taproot is the speedy trial attack. I know it's not much of an attack. It actually upgraded in a good way. True. But it was outside community consensus and without full validation from the community. And even though it went through, people still finished the validation process, and then they went ahead and kept it because it did actually do a good job. But there are tons of times where people upgrade to Bitcoin without sending in a Git or anything like that. And Speedy Trial was supposed to make that process faster or easier to do. And Taproot proved that it really does make it easier to do. So hash rate slippage. This is not a death spiral, but it's staying close to it. And this has happened 2 times in the Bitcoin history. So basically, the Bitcoin hash rate, it dips real hard, bro. And so the 2 times it's happened, we were always in the middle. So we were about 1 week in, supportively, into correcting itself. But the correction time length was about 2.5 weeks for each of these. I think one of them was actually almost, it was like just like a few days away or a day away from being 3 weeks. It was extremely long. And so what this does is basically someone adds in a bunch of hash rate to the system right after a block is found. Okay. And then right before the next block is found, they drop all that hash rate. And if this is done enough times, repeatedly, enough times, very real close, you get as close to as soon as that block post to as soon as right before that next block post, basically you can cause the hash rate to go up and down so much that correction times become longer and longer and longer. And the funny part is sometimes if you get enough hash rate to go in and out, you can do this one time and it will affect the chain for about a half a week, because time is not actually coded into Bitcoin. It doesn't go, bro, 2.2 weeks later, 14 days later, I need to check myself. No, what it does is it goes, hey, when it takes X length of time to create this many zeros in front of a SHA, we need to correct ourselves. And so what it does, there's so often it just kind of asks, hey, bro, how long did it take? How long did it take, bro? How long did it take? And I think nowadays, like most blocks actually have that time into it, and with announce it can figure out that data. So then it says, oh, okay, it's taking too long to create 36 zeros or whatever the number of zeros actually is, and then it will correct itself. So what you're doing is you're basically saying, hey, we're getting these zeros too quickly, and then out of nowhere, everyone's taking much longer to create those zeros. So when the block blocks, right, and it's correction time, it says, hey, everyone made all of these things. They're making these things in like 10 seconds, bro. That's fast. So then it says, okay, we got more difficulty. And then all of that hash rate's gone now. So now it's taking everybody even longer. And this creates this slippage of hash rate to cause almost a death spiral, but not actually a death spiral. And we will actually get into death spiral. So dust attacks. This isn't exactly, an attack on the chain. This is an attack on the users of Bitcoin. And this is one that was really prevalent in 2017. So basically, someone sends en masse tiny bits of Bitcoin, a few sats, to as many wallets as possible, just so they can kind of get a value range of wallets, who is using what wallet, how they're using it. Because even though I know, like the original Bitcoin white paper says, just use one wallet once, there's no reason why you have to use one wallet once, especially if you have a wallet that has no physical ties to anything else. You can use it multiple times. I do it all the time. I actually have specific wallets for specific needs that I use all the time, just for those specific needs and nothing else. And that, I know people think is crazy, but it's totally doable, bro. And so dust attacks help find these types of wallets. If you have a wallet with a lot of Bitcoin in it and you get dusted, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get rid of some of those coins, because now someone's watching it. And nowadays, most people don't even care about this. Most exchanges and wallets just don't show these, and they just don't use those UTXOs. But there are people trying to build stuff that might actually help with this stuff in the future. So zero confirmation attack, which is an attack on people who actually accept Bitcoin. It's pretty simple. They accept your Bitcoin transaction with zero confirmations. Soon as it hits like the mempool, bro, soon as it might be in a block, bro, boom, they're accepting that confirmation. And I think it's actually like as soon as it's in a block, but no miners have actually confirmed that block or whatever, that they also have it. So, and a lot of times your Bitcoin ATMs use zero confirmation, and those are the ones that normally get hit the hardest. So now ideological attacks. This is where it gets a little bit more fun. And some of these are actually kind of short. So bear with me because this is where it gets more fun. So single block rollback. So very often you normally just hear about rollback, which is right after this one. So basically a single block rollback is when someone creates enough hash power or whatever, and they have a predeformed block they want blocked. And so they keep trying to get this one block blocked. Once that block gets blocked, all it does is roll back the previous block. That's it. It just rolls back one block. So the previous block never happened now. And in return, it's pretty much putting this other block in its place. And this is an ideological attack. And the way we protect against this is most minor, like I think this has been tried but never been fully executed. So we used to have something called block swap. And this is very similar to that. And so what we just did is we just stopped accepting most block swaps. And this is still probably the most reasonable possible attacks, but still one of the most difficult ones to actually achieve, just because the way the data is being stored on so many, we got so many like machines and nodes that are looking at the last block, the very last block. So many people watching the chain, that kind of attack is going to be noticeable. So now we go to a rollback. We did mention rollback before a couple times now, but rollback is actually when you roll back the chain. You actually, we're at block 1528, we roll it back to 1515 maybe. Roll it back to a specific block you want changed. And you go just before that, and you replace all the data that you just rolled back with different data, and it gets appended to the blockchain in replace of the old one. So the way we protect against this is actually the hash rate. And you could say this, the SBR, the single block rollback, same thing. Hash rate plays a lot into the security of this measure. Believe it or not, like rollback and a couple other things is the number one reason for high hash rate. Like quantum machine attack and stuff like that. Basically, all that is where they perform more whatevers, and if they get hit, they can do a lot faster code points than a regular machine. So the rollback just rolls back the chain to a previous point and replaces the data from then to now with whatever data they wanted. And technically, that's kind of how your nation states will do. So next is shadow mining. Another attack that hash rate protects against. Shadow mining is kind of fun and confusing to think about. Basically, I'm going to create a fake version of the Bitcoin blockchain from a certain point to now. And I keep making new blocks, rather they are real blocks that are actually appended to the Bitcoin blockchain or not. Doesn't matter. Most people will use a combination of some of the ones they want implemented and some of the ones they don't want implemented. So actual blocks and then fake blocks. And what this will do is eventually they'll get that entire chain to be, the hope is they'll get it longer than the main chain, and then get all the miners to accept it instead of the main chain to completely change out chains, which can change out transactions from long ago, make some transactions no longer valuable or possible, and be able to take, theoretically, while it's down to zero, if you remove that block out of it, the transactional block that it got all that funds from. Now, there are a bunch of issues here because so far, like, believe it or not, like, Bitcoin doesn't actually go by longest chain. That was a theoretical, plausible concept put in the Bitcoin white paper of how it could work. And we just don't do that nowadays. We look at the consensus chain nowadays. So shadow mining is probably the least possible out of these three that we just talked about that hash rate helps protect against. So empty block attacks. These have happened in the past. We've actually had these in the past, but not on Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin has had empty blocks in the past, back when there's just very little activity, but not an attack of empty blocks. So what is this? This is basically like a digital sit down or DDoS of the actual chain. This is blocking nothing in a block. And so the concept behind this is if you had enough miners block empty blocks, you could just stop allowing transactions on the Bitcoin network. And something that, some people fear about that they will use for fear mongering, get you to do other things. And this is actually called a DDoTX, distributed denial of transactions That's what this type of attack actually is. So it's a scary one to think about, and there's not a whole lot we can really do to protect against this. But if we was to see 3 sequential empty blocks, basically, as a community, the consensus has been made about what we do. And so what we do to protect against it is we have the ability to, like earlier, potentially block traffic routes and IPs, so that way that individual has to work a little bit harder to get back into the network. So quorum needed attack. So I still think this is a weird one, because this is like a proof of stake attack. But basically, if Bitcoin ever needed a quorum to be achieved for consensus, so we need 85% of the miners instead of just a miner to be able to block a block. And this is not really one that I find valuable, but if someone was to change the code to allow for quorum, so that way we could do like second layer transactionals on the Bitcoin main chain, well, there might be a quorum for that. And if there's ever a quorum needed, that is a type of an attack. It means you can actually get it to where the chain or the whatever can't reach quorum in order to make a block. And then that actually halts the chain. It just stops it right there. So quorum needed attack. Now, DDoS, so actually distributed denial service, this is to the miners, bro. Not the node, to the miners. The miners can't communicate with each other to create a block. Now, we do have ways to protect against this by we send the Bitcoin blockchain over satellite. We send the Bitcoin blockchain over ham radio and CB radio, so shortwave radio frequencies. There are paper copies of the Bitcoin blockchain, and even ways to submit paper blocks into the paper blockchain, which then if it gets blocked, if it actually gets blocked, they will submit it. And if it actually gets blocked, then it gets put into the thing. So it's like, we just have other methods of utilizing the blockchain or talking to the blockchain to protect against this. 51% attack. Okay, this is the most common thing that you always hear. 51% attack, bro. I need to mention that this 51% attacks are individual blocks at a time. Okay, so basically they gain 51% of the hash rate to be able to get every block in the block. Or here's the thing though, you're still at a coin toss chance if that 51% of the miners you have actually are able to get the block in. Because the way the Bitcoin network works is it doesn't automatically just go, hey bro, I trust you because I let you block last time, let's block again. No, if you have 99% of the miners in the Bitcoin network, there is still like a 90% chance you won't be the one blocking the next block if you block this block. So in the past, there have been times where people had like 6 sequential blocks from a single miner or miner set or pool. That happens less and less and less. And basically, if you have a 51% of the hash network, does not mean you are guaranteed the next block. So even you have 51% attacks, doesn't mean it's going to do anything. It's not like when you're early on in a chain, that's when it really makes a difference, because 51% attack and young chains could be 99% of the miners. While if you have 51% of the Bitcoin network hash rate, bro, no, there's still like another couple of 100,000 miners out there to tell you no. And so in case you're wondering, it's like 160,000 miners to get 51% attack right now. And that's based on if you were all using the same, like if all the miners were using the exact same S19 ant miner or whatever. But no, they all use different ones. So could actually be more, depending on what you're doing. Pool gatherer. I think that's a weird name. Using a single large pool to attack the Bitcoin network with shadow mining or DDoS. An example of something of this, but it didn't happen to the Bitcoin network, is NiceHash is a Bitcoin mining network. It's a pool, right? You can mine to them. Well, they actually have used their hash rate in the past to switch to other chains and do other kinds of attacks to either prevent things from happening or to ensure money from specific chains very quickly to be able to pay back these miners in Bitcoin. And that's the best example of the attack it is basically someone gathers enough people behind them in a pool that they control, and then they use that control for nefarious reasons. But it'd be back on the Bitcoin network, rather shadow mining or DUSing the actual miners. So internal validation. So there's two ways to look at this. If the data is too large to validate, so we can't unload all the data in your RAM and unload all of the block header in your RAM in order to validate your information. Or the data inside the block is unvalidatable. So in the past, people, Bitcoiners have tried to do zero snark transactions and various privacy transactions. And this was an error that kept coming up where basically data couldn't be validated properly. And so some blocks got orphaned because of the fact of data within it couldn't be validated. And not all of them. There are actually still to this day ZK snark transactions on the Bitcoin network, just in the history of it. So that one way we validate is we just have we just have this one simple point. We have to be able to validate stuff, bro. That's the point of Bitcoin. Validation. No more trust. Validation. And believe it or not, when you're doing privacy transactions, 99% of the time, there has to be some form of trust there. And it's trust in the hash. It's kind of crazy. Code base or Git attacks. Now, when we say code base, in this case, we're actually talking about the code that runs the miners, software, validation, that kind of stuff. Or Git attack, being like GitHub, the repository, or any other form of Git repo. So basically, it's using the Git against the community. It's using the code we run it off of against us, the community. And that could be as much as like shutting down the GitHub, adding nefarious data points into the Git or something like that. And the way we basically protect against this is Bitcoin don't give a fuck about the Git. I know everyone thinks that the Git is what improves Bitcoin, but actually the miners allow the improvement of Bitcoin. The Git is actually, in most devs' eyes, the history of Bitcoin, because you don't have to submit anything. You don't have to submit a BIP or anything into the Git to get Bitcoin to be changed. And submitting into the Git most likely won't do nothing unless you're super famous. And submitting a BIP doesn't always do anything unless you get a lot of miners behind you. But in general, you're going to have to get miners behind you in the first place. So developer attacks. Now, we saw this with Tornado Cash. They actually went after a developer. A government went after them. So this is not, the coders, developers, anybody with the right keys. Some people already say this is happening because Blockstream pays like 90 to 99% of the heads of the Bitcoin Git. But again, like I was just saying, the Git doesn't move the Bitcoin forward. And Blockstream is paying these people that are running the Git for Bitcoin because some of the stuff they're doing is big work, and they have to validate information and make sure stuff doesn't get accepted in the wrong way, or else it could create new attacks on Bitcoin. And rather, just because as odd as it is when you're working with Bitcoin and stuff, just because a company pays you, don't mean you have to have loyalty to that company. Because it works like this. If you're developing a Bitcoin and you're getting paid cash or US dollar or some fiat from a company, well, that's kind of your stupidity. But if you're getting paid in Bitcoin from some company, well, then there ain't nothing they can do if you don't do what they want you to do. And so that's what it comes down to, is when you're developing for Bitcoin, it's always your choice to do or don't do. It's a community-run project. If though a company's paying you, don't mean shit. Now, I'm sure there are some people out there like, bro, Blockstream pay me $1 million a year to do Bitcoin. I'll do whatever the fuck they want. But that's why those people are not heads of the Bitcoin Git. So regulation attack, basically something we're kind of seeing where they try to regulate Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is designed to naturally bypass this. This is the natural value of Bitcoin, bypassing regulations, states, governments, and blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, pretty simple. Out of range attack. This one's fun. Don't know why it's called out of range, but this makes older Bitcoin transactions or UTXOs or even software unusable with the current version. So one of the things that Bitcoin's always said is no matter how Bitcoin gets in the future, the original and past stuff always have to be accepted, whether it's UTXO transactions and software types. So I can still load up the original Bitcoin software and I can talk with the system. I can set up miners, because all that's accepted. And if for any reason out of range became a thing in Bitcoin, well, that means the original Satoshi nonce would never be able to be used, which means that, well, we would have Bitcoins locked forever. About 1 million or so of them. So, and now miner collusion attack. Basically, a bunch of miners get together to collude to refuse to block specific blocks from meme pools. That's pretty much it. And if you watch my talk, gold versus Bitcoin, where I rebutted that one guy that was talking about it, basically believed that all the miners were colluding with each other. Well, he already believed that is a thing. But this is a type of attack that we've never actually seen before in the Bitcoin network. And that's positive because you don't want this kind of attack. This could really ruin a lot of things. Death spiral. This is a direct hash rate attack. You increase the hash rate so much, you wait for the Bitcoin network to correct itself. So it says, oh, bro, difficulty got to be up uber high today. And then you drop tons of hash rate. So like right now, if you dropped about 35% of the hash rate right now, most people would call that a Bitcoin death spiral. But actually, when we saw that happen in the past, it didn't death spiral. It just took 3 days longer to actually do that correction. And if you was to drop 50% of the block hash right now, the hash rate right now in Bitcoin, it would actually, so say we did a correction today, right now, boom, correction just happened, bro. Difficulty just went up. Second later, 50% of the hash rate's gone. It would take us 3 months to do the next correction, but it would still do blocks. Although blocks would no longer be every 10 minutes, they would be a little bit longer. And when I say a little bit longer, about a couple of hours, about 2 hours worth. But the fact of the matter is, Bitcoin network would still continue to move forward. Stuff would still happen. It would just be a bit slow. But an actual death spiral is where supposedly the hash rate drops so much that it can never progress. So the amount of rate of time it would take for that next block would be within like 30, 40, 50 years time. And that we have never been able to see. And I don't actually think something like that can happen to Bitcoin because of how Bitcoin, the software and stuff, how it does all the checks and balances to see about that zero in front of the SHA. So instant transaction, and these are sometimes called concrete transactions. So when you have instant transactions or unremovable transactions that are immediately appended, that is an attack method because now we can do various other types of double spins and other things that will be then concreted into the block. So then you're kind of screwed. You have to stuck with it. So remember that original attack, too many Bitcoins and what's supposed to exist. Imagine if that got concreted, bro, we'd be screwed. 21 million, 52 billion. So that is a real type of attack. That's actually, there are some proof of stake chains that realized kind of early on, hey, this is an actual form of attack. This is not a benefit in our chain. And there's a couple of blockchains that still use this type of blocking, and they consider it a protection. So keep in mind, if it's instant and concrete or both or one or the other, you can really attack that chain so fast that there's nothing that chain can do to protect itself. And so time attack. Now, this is similar to death spiral, but the real point of what time attack is inserting time into the data, the code, that blockchain that Bitcoin runs off of. If you insert time, then it's a lot easier to do a death spiral. But some people say if you insert time, it actually protects against the death spiral, because then even if it's literally 14 days later, rather we've had a block or not, the Bitcoin would be able to automatically adjust. But at the same time, if we have time in the code, and enough people change the time on their device and start submitting from their location, or they use a VPN and submit from location with time change on that device, you can actually have malformed block times. So some blocks would say that it was 2 days ago, and then the next block would be like 2 days tomorrow, 2 days in the future. And this is a user attack in this case that says, hey, users are going to make more mistakes when trying to figure out what's going on. Imagine looking at the blockchain and it says that this block was blocked 2 days tomorrow, like in 2 days from now, you're going to be really confused. And because, we're talking about globalization on Bitcoin, the miners, you can't really rely on time at all because, well, the world is always in 2 different days at the same time, continuously. So, yeah. Well, maybe not continuously, but for the most part, there's 2 different days on this earth at almost any point in time. And these really are the common, the old, and the possible attacks that Bitcoin can or may face. And as you can tell, most of the ways it protects itself is hash rate, always being optimal with itself, and community-driven everything. This is really 3 methods to protect Bitcoin blockchain that most people don't even really consider protection. There are tons of developers out there and stuff. They're like, community is not a protection rate. Buy-in is protection rate and stuff like that. And in reality, when you think about it, like your community driving the whole thing, the fact that it's always inoperable with its past, and the fact that you have the hash rate high to protect various security points, those are really good. Having an X number of miners all working independently, that's good. The fact that some people throw a fit because there is a pool called unknown is kind of weird, but if the community wasn't driving the whole thing, that one person would be able to get that pool to change its name so they could find out who's moving that pool. And really, if you're not using a pool, you're an unknown miner anyways, which was the point of making a pool called unknown. It was just to stick it to the people who use pools as a method of validating miners, which is not a way to validate miners. The way you validate miners is the block address, the wallet address used on your miner is, that's just the wallet address that you use to announce to people that you mine. So, and if you go to freebitco.in, he does that actually. He does a really good job. He's been in that for years and years, like 2012, I think, when he first came up. He actually uses his mining wallet. He gives it out to you so you can validate that he's actually blocks and has Bitcoin at any point in time. It's kind of crazy cool. So again, I do want to do another one of these Bitcoin security talks, and I want to go over like hash rate secures the chain and different things. But at the same time, I want to give you, the viewers, an option to ask questions about Bitcoin, whether it's security or anything. It doesn't really matter. Just ask. Even if you want me to do like a price guess or whatever, come at me, bro. So just comment on this video right here, down below, on Twitter, or hit me up on Twitter, like __3D ____. I know that's kind of confusing. It's 2 underscores, 3D, 3 underscores. Boom, that's me. You'll see this lovely avatar face as the profile, so you know it's me. And just DM me or tag me your question. Just say, hey, here's my Bitcoin question, and throw it at me. Now, if you have questions about anything outside of Bitcoin, I'll accept that too, as long as it's cryptocurrency related, and it'll probably make it onto the show, whether it's the same episode or a different one. I just want to hear what you guys have questions about, so I can directly answer them, because I'm not shilling to you. I'm straight up just trying to help you learn and understand what's going on, because the more perspectives I can change about things, then the easier it's going to be for everybody to move forward. For everybody, if more people have an understanding of basic concepts of things, like whether it's Bitcoin or security or privacy or whatever, then it's only going to help us, because then there's less fear mongering that will affect you. There's less FOMO that's going to affect you. You're going to feel more comfortable with what you're doing. And in general, the more comfortable Bitcoin users we have, or cryptocurrency users we have, a lot nicer the space is, because, people have less care to fight. They'll be like, it don't matter, bro. Instead of 2 people fighting over something so dumb, like, well, we need bigger block sizes. We don't need bigger block sizes. You know, we had like 2 years of that, and it still goes on in some areas of the internet where people still fight over block size. Well, guess what? If we all had more understanding of why we're at 1 megabyte block size, it'd be a lot less fighting. Why is there 1 megabyte block size? Because when we were doing more than 1 megabyte block size, we were seeing issues where we had 4 or 5 blocks in a row that were like 3 megabytes. Not everybody at the time could actually validate all the data very easily at the same time. So you'd have to validate 1 block at a time. I know 1 megabyte sounds not a whole lot, but to do the math for 1 megabyte of data is actually quite a bit to reverse the information that you're getting to be able to validate information. Because the SHA, the algorithm works in 2 main forms, and it's huge. And the whole point of that is like, the smaller we can make this stuff, yeah, sure, there's less data we can put in a block, but over time we'll figure out ways to make that data in the block smaller. And we have. Look at Taproot now. One of the smallest ways to put data into a block, get the most out of your block. And it's just showing that, you know, when you want bigger block sizes, there's other Bitcoins to go for, bro. And this allows, you know, decentralization of the currency, because we shouldn't all be centralized to just one currency. But if we're gonna be, let's make that Bitcoin. I know it sounds strange, but you guys, thank you for enjoyed this. I hope I got to change your perspective on these types of things, what they are, what they mean, and why they're not happening, and how we protect against them. Because I know there's some people out there that just get a little scared when they hear that there is a way to attack Bitcoin, bro. All right, have a great day.